biking, we use this terminology quite a lot, and pretty much all throughout the 12 months of the season, we talk about or use the reference points of LT1 and LT2. And I think for me, that the reason for using that a lot with age groupers is because they do have limited time. So if we can do aerobic riding around about LT1, which is kind of the hardest we would want them to go and be able to recover quite well for the next session. So we
Yeah.
use that a lot. I think if they had unlimited time, and they didn't have to go to work at all and didn't have kids to look after and drop off here, there, and everywhere, they could probably just substitute that for a lot of volume riding.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to say is, okay, we know you've only got an hour, and we'd normally want you to do 90 minutes or 2 hours if you had your ultimate way with your training. So how and why do we use LT1 then?
Good question. So, yeah, a bit like what Phil said around threshold development. If you're, if you're riding, I'd probably say if you're riding sort of under 5 hours a week, which for majority of people within a normal week, that's probably the case.
Yeah,
Maybe even 6 hours. A lot of our riding has to be done up to that first threshold, and our first threshold is basically defined as lactate buildup above base level. So as it starts to increase, so basically anything below LT1 in theory shouldn't cost you much or cost you very little. Um, so if you can do a lot of your work close to that, and anything just under LT1 is what we call zone 2 training, and a lot of literature out there. And it's becoming a bit more faddy in recent
yeah,
years since Pogacar has started doing a lot of that stuff. Um, anything around that zone 2 or higher zone 2, depending on how much volume you're doing, will is the most bang for your buck training that you can do, because one, it doesn't add lots of fatigue, but it's still reason it's not hard, but it's sort of more on the aerobic end of riding. So that's probably what we generally prescribe, especially if you think of our sort of Tuesday session, they're only sort of 75 minutes. So you have to do work in and around that. If
yeah,
you're just doing an easy spin for 75 minutes and you've only got another bike session that week, well, that's where you call it junk mileage, because you're not really gaining anything from it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that's where we would prescribe sort of in and around that first threshold, where you're progressing as well as you can for the limited hours that you can train.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I like that. And obviously we tend for most people to estimate where LT1 would lie as being, like you say, the upper border of zone 2, kind of from a power perspective. Similar from a heart rate. We can obviously individualize people's plans if we actually get some lab testing or they've had some metabolic testing and we know where the actual thresholds lie through lactate testing. Otherwise, as I said, we tend to sort of estimate where they will lie. And
Yeah.
obviously, like we said before, somebody who is less aerobically trained over less years and perhaps come from team sports or has been more of a sprint type athlete or weightlifter or whatever, you would probably expect theirs will be a little lower than that, and you might reduce the numbers. And again, I think, would you probably say that for the most aerobically trained, most efficient cyclist, it would probably get up to about 80% of FTP, would you say? Or
Yeah, probably be about that as most as you see.
yeah,
It's generally between sort of 70 and
yeah,
80%. But
yeah,
I say me and Phil have seen enough lab data to be able to pretty much predict what it would be if we sent you to a lab. Like we'd only be, 10 watts out generally.
yeah,
Um, because you've seen enough lab data over years to go, with an FTP test, and if you understand that person that you're coaching, and like Phil says, understand what sports they've done, what's their physical makeup look like, you could pretty much guess what it is relatively
yeah.
close.
And that's again the interesting thing about like LT1 is that for endurance sports and triathlon, particularly the middle distance and up, that LT1 figure is perhaps, from my point of view, more interesting and maybe more important than the LT2 or the FTP number, because
Yeah.
that's more likely be the effort level that we're actually going to race at. And if we can become more efficient and more attuned and more resilient at that kind of effort level, then might well improve our race times more than just lifting threshold. Because as we know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
some
yeah,
threshold
yeah.
improvements come through anaerobic means, don't they? Which is